You've probably heard a bit about this product called Microsoft Purview. Microsoft Purview is Microsoft's data governance tool. It can be used in a variety of ways to help you manage your data environment. I'm going to take you through a few elements today, key highlights of Purview, and see how that might be useful in your own organisation. So let's begin. So to access Microsoft Purview, we log in to our Azure portal into the Purview service. We have this button here that we can use to open that portal from Azure portal. For most of your users are not going to be doing that, they'll go direct to the URL. If I type that in, and it's just web.purview.azure.com, we're taken to a login screen. Now I've already authenticated through the portal. If I choose my directory, I can choose my account. I can have multiple Purview accounts in my tenancy. And once it logs in, I now have access to the governance portal. So inside the governance portal, I have a search option. Much like modern search engines, we're able to quickly access and find information. I can either use search or I can browse my assets. I can also access the glossary, which is very important for business users. We'll show the non-privileged user a bit later. Experience is a little bit different, but fairly much the same. There's a lot of resources available on the home screen here. I'm going to take you through some of the menu items on the left, which is the key elements of how you use and manage your Purview instance. The home screen takes us here. We're able to access our data and our data catalog quite easily. But the data map is where we manage a lot of the assets we have in our environment. We'll come back to this shortly. The data share is a new feature that allows us to understand what is data sharing, how we send and receive shares, and integrated within the Purview portal using the Microsoft data sharing capabilities. We also have the data estate insights. This provides us with metrics and telemetry and a range of parameters about Microsoft Purview. Again, we'll explore this in more detail, but it's useful for the data stewards, data custodians, to be able to use, access and manage the information curated within Microsoft Purview. We also have data policy, which is again another preview feature. And this is really around how we can specify and define data policies and self-service access policy as well. Won't be exploring too much in this session, but this is some new features around how we can start applying requests and to the data assets underlying using the policies available to us. We then have a management menu, which is some of the configuration within Purview, as well as how we can set up the workflows as well that runs within the environment. They're the key menu items in here. This has been recorded in June 2022 with a lot of preview features, so some of this may look different when you get to use it. So we're back at the home screen for Microsoft Purview. Before we dive deep into looking at our data assets, let's look at how we add data sets into Microsoft Purview. So we go over to the data map, and this is the key area where you will add in and scan and curate the data. We have a range of sources inside this visual here, this map view, and information in our data sets are managed via collections. We have a root collection, and as I expand this, we can have collections underneath that, and even collections underneath that too as well. If I expand, I've just given these two example ones here using transactional data and administrative data. If I expand these and then just scroll with move my mouse, we can see I've got a range of Azure Blob Storage accounts. I've got Power BI connected, an Amazon S3 dataset, as well as a Azure SQL database as well. Think of the collections as a way to manage the boundaries for you to provide groupings of your data, as well as around security permissions as well. Before I go registering that, it's pretty important to touch on when we look at the collections and the collections view on the left here, and I go into our administrative data as an example, look at the role assignments that you can apply inside of Purview. We have our collection admins. We also have data source admins, those that manage the data sources and connectivity of data sources. We have data curators. So these are the data stewards who will want to update the metadata and manage the data assets, but won't be involved in the infrastructure and administration of connecting data sources together. And then the vast majority of the users will be these data readers, those that come in and search and browse in your data catalog. You can also have data share contributors, as well as insights readers and policy authors as well. And you'll see why that's relevant in further parts of this session. Go back to my sources though. I want to add a new data source into my administrative data collection. So I click on this icon to register a new data source. I could use the same button at the top here as well. Go back to here, and I'm presented with a range of data sources that I can bring in. As I scroll through here, you can see a lot of this is it's AWS, a lot of Azure services you can connect, and a range of other systems you may be using as well, including some of the Google services online, SAP, Salesforce, a very wide variety of these data sources. If you don't see your data source here or not too sure, certainly worthwhile checking some documentation. There's other ways to represent data inside of Purview without actually physically connecting to it as well. So you can use some of the Microsoft Purview APIs to create your data assets and have those represented inside the data catalog. I'm going to connect a MySQL server just as an example and continue on that. So it's asking for some information. I can give it a meaningful name. I can give it the name of my SQL server. I'm also going to then put the server name in to connect to here. The rest is going to leave. I can change the collection if I've entered the wrong collection to start this with. I'll also move this later if I've decided I want to relocate where this data asset lives. Your data asset can only live once inside of your Purview instance, so you can't register the same server multiple times inside of this account. So I click register. That's going to register that within the data map. So now we have our MySQL server listed in the administrative data collection. That alone is not going to actually bring data in. We just have to scan to do that. So I click on this new scan icon on my data asset, and I'll give it a meaningful name. Because it's connecting within Azure, I don't need to worry about the integration runtime in this case. And I've preset a credential as well to connect into my SQL database. So I'm going to grab a database name. This is just a simple database that I have provisioned, and hit continue. I have the ability to then set a schedule for my scans. So I can do that once a month. I can do it, several times a week, or particular weekdays, or just do a one-off. So we'll leave it as now for Monday at 2 AM. And then hit continue. So now I'm ready. I can just save that, and that will run this coming Monday. Or I can go set it off right now. Let me show you in our Azure SQL database, we get the details in here, one that's already been pre-scanned. So I have information about my data source in here, and I click on the scan name right here, and I can see that we've got the full scan, which we kicked off originally. We've got incremental scan here. We're still doing incremental lineage extraction on a regular basis, just to see how this asset might be used across other data assets. That's a really important concept of Purview, is this traceability between your data assets using this lineage functionality. Going back to our data map, you can see you can add more data sets as you go. In a lot of cases, many organizations are using file-based assets to be able to ingest data. So it might be CSV, Parquet files, and the like. So you don't register every individual file in that case. You insert the data source that contains that. And then all you have to do is upload the file. So if we look at this Amazon S3 dataset, we can upload a file there and have that come into our catalog. So if I switch over to our S3 bucket, I'm able to then upload a new file. I'm just going to drag a spreadsheet I prepared before. This is a sample file for some supermarket grocery sales, and hit upload. So that's up there now. I'll close that. I'll put that away. So now I go into viewing my details for my S3 bucket and go into my scan, and I'm going to run a new incremental scan as well. So that scan's been accepted, and it's going to process and ingest that new file. So you can see how you can have a daily recurrence of updating the Purview index for any new files that come into Microsoft Purview. This approach that we've run for the S3 bucket will work for storage accounts and data lake, as well as new files are being brought into your environment. So now that we've connected some data assets, let's actually have a look inside of our data catalog and see what we can see. So I'm going to go to my home screen in Purview and browse my assets. I'm going to go into our transactional data, and I'm going to pick on this first file here, which is a Parquet file coming from our S3 bucket. So let's have a look at what we have available to us in Microsoft Purview. We have this overview page around this particular item. We can see a description that I've already set. Any classifications might be applied, any schema level classifications have been applied, as well as the full qualified domain name. Also have on the right a hierarchy from the collection and also within the data source, and any glossary terms applied here as well. If we continue along the top of the tab here, there's additional properties that we can also see from this item. It pulls the schema from this file itself if the file, in this case, or the data source allows you to read the schema. So CSVs, Parquets, as well as structured data sources will pull this in. And we can see we also have metadata available to classify licensing labels, apply glossary terms, as well as describe our data assets, as well as data types that are pulled out of the Parquet file itself. Now in terms of lineage, we don't have any lineage for this item, and we'll show that separately in this session, but this will show up here as well. I can also apply contacts for those who might be experts or the owners of the item. Again, as a referral to find people. I've repopulated some names here. And any related files are also then available inside the groupings available within this folder. So that provides a bit of a summary of what you sort of see within the environment, but it needs to be enriched largely with additional metadata as you create your data assets. So if I edit this item, I have the ability to make changes to the description. I can apply classifications. Now these are classifications that Microsoft has predefined, and if there's any rules or patterns that it detects that matches up with those, such as a ABN, Australian Business Number, for example, which I like also manually select, then it'll try and pick that up as part of its rules and matching engine. There's a lot of other international ones other than just Australia, which is there's date of birth, there's email addresses, there's credit card details. I scrolled past before as well. If you need to classify where it's containing some of the sensitive information. And classifications apply not only to data asset, but also to the schema as well. I'll show you in the next example. We can also apply glossary terms, and these are terms that we've created, or as a data stream I've created as well. There's some samples. So I might call this, for example, big data. It's a Parquet file, so maybe it's part of my big data collection. And that can be applied there. So you can see how I can also apply very similar to the schema. I can make the selections, much like I did before on the overall data asset, and also add contacts. So maybe the expert isn't a demo user, or maybe they are. I can take it down to 1 as it's also the owner already, so maybe it's not required, and tidy that up. We're going to hit save. That's something back, and you'll see those updates now applied. This little lightning bolt just indicates it's a system provided classification, and you can create your own classifications as well and own classification rules. We won't explore it in today's session and save it for another time. And it has glossary terms as well. This will be important when we want to be able to search for our data. It helps enrich the data assets we've got rather than relying on the indexing and extraction metadata that Purview does automatically. In some cases, as I said, it will pull some of these classifications out for you. So let's go back to browsing our assets, and we're going to go to the administrative sort of data, and we'll go to this customers table here as well. Now, inside this one, this customers table, I've created a bit of metadata here already. I've already given a asset description, not very informative, the test, but asset description nonetheless. I've also used a inbuilt classification, and I've also included a custom, which is a sensitivity label, separate to the sensitivity labeling available in Purview, but in this case I can also manually apply that in this case, or create my own categories of sensitivity or classifications I need to create. I've also pulled out, or the system rather, has already pulled out also schema level classifications using the US phone number and zip code formats. We also see we have a different hierarchy view because of the nature of this being a SQL environment. We have the table to the schema to the database to the server, and some glossary terms as well. You've seen most of the other tabs. I'll just take you to the schema, which is again shows you how the data types come across, but also where then the classifications apply. So it's found the US zip codes across 3 different columns inside of this table, and the phone number here once. So that provides you a little bit of an overview of some information that you can view and edit within a data asset. So I've shown you how to edit metadata on a single asset. What if you want to edit metadata on multiple assets at once? So there's 2 techniques you can use to do that. I've gone into Microsoft Purview and I've just browsed our transactional data collection, and I have a list of the items in the data catalog. If I hover over that, there's a little checkbox on the right hand side, and if I select that, I can start selecting multiple items that then I can group down here in the bottom right. If I click on this view selected, I'm able to see these 3 assets, and I have this bulk edit button up the top here. So I can go into this item and I can use a term or a classification or an owner, expert or self-certified. In this case, I might want to add a term, I want to add a term or replace or remove a term. And this one might be, say, maybe it's around attribute disclosure, and hit apply. And those will be applied. So that metadata will be applied then to those 3 items. If I deselect and close and go back into the item looking at earlier in the session, I now have attribute disclosure, big data. Now this technique is useful, but it's limited up to 25 items. So what do? We want to edit metadata in bulk. Let's suppose you want to do a bulk edit and you might have this information inside of a spreadsheet, which is a common scenario. Microsoft Purview allows the use of APIs to make programmatic changes to your data. In fact, it provides a lot of flexibility. And one of those ways is to edit metadata, so add entities as well. I'm going to show you a very simple example of how we might use a spreadsheet to make a change inside of one of our assets. So this third item in our spreadsheet is that Parquet file we were looking earlier in the sessions. So I'm going to give it an example of here is a new description. Stop. So I'm going to save that. Now that it's saved, I've created a script based off a library that I'll also show you, and I'll run that PowerShell command. Just going to go through every line item in the CSV file and make those changes. So how does that look back here in the data catalog? I'm going to press the refresh button inside my item, and we'll see the sample description change to here is a new description. Fairly straightforward. If you'd like to know more about how you can use PowerShell and Python to use the APIs in Purview, highly recommend this GitHub repository about PyApache Atlas, using a Python SDK to be able to interrogate that. So example, just use these examples to be able to bring this information together and make that simple change in attributes. There's a lot you can do, and suggest having a little explore and play in a development environment, and to try a few things out that might help you with creating your data catalog. Certainly though, for most people getting started, using the interface inside of Purview will serve you well until you have that need to provide a lot of metadata editing at scale. So one of the common requests I hear about organizations exploring Microsoft Purview is this word lineage. So lineage is the ability to show the connections between your data assets. Let me show you a couple of examples. I'm going to browse my data assets and go by collection and go into my root collection in this case, and look at this file, scroll down here to COVID table. So this COVID table looks like every other data source or data asset we've already brought in. But if I go to this Lineage tab, we'll see something a little bit different. We can see our table on the right-hand side here. We can also see it's connected through this copy data command, which is actually Microsoft Azure Data Factory, which is doing a simple copy from a CSV file in a blob store, loading into a SQL table. And this is really useful to know where did this data come from, and how to get there, and what processes were applied. So what we've done in this case, we've connected Purview to Azure Data Factory, which also has ingested these data sources, which can map this out for us. So as you start using the Microsoft data services like Data Factory and Azure SQL databases and blob storage and the like, you can start building out this map. I can also then click on my asset over here and actually switch to it. It shows me its lineage view from this perspective, but now I go back over and I'm now in the hierarchy of the originating data in this case. As this builds out more complexity, as a very simple example, but you see how that could become quite useful understanding that tracing of data through your environment. Let's go back and look at another example. I'm going to just go by source type and look at Power BI. This is another great use case where reports are published, but what data is it using and where does it come from? We're going to this Purview demo here. So again, Power BI data sets and reports are treated as data assets inside of Purview and go into the report itself. Again, it has a very similar structure. I can apply classifications and glossary terms and descriptions across this. You can also see inside the lineage view that my Purview demo report comes from this data set, which comes from this database. And that is really helpful. If I need to make a change to this database, I can go into this database, look at how it's connected, and see what those downstream impacts might be. Conversely, if I don't want to know what data this came from, I can see how this report might be connected to one or more data sources on the back end. So data lineage just becomes a really important tool to managing your data in your data environment. In some cases, we've found that data lineage can't always work with some of the source systems. So what you can do is use the Microsoft Purview APIs to then create that lineage and mappings yourself programmatically. There are examples of how to use the API in the previous part of this session that you can refer to. So let's now take a look now at one of the key items in our data catalogue, which is a business glossary. Business glossary is a way to have predefined terms within the organisation that makes sense in its context, and it's particular to the organisation, the industry, that helps then define, describe, make sure that people are using the same terms within the organisation. So to do that, we have this Manage Glossary button here on our home screen. Now, if I scroll through this list, we can see there's a range of terms already described. Terms really is up to you and how you need to organise your information. If you have an existing glossary or a BCS, Business Classification Scheme, or ECS, Enterprise Classification Scheme, that'd be a good place to start for the types of things you may want to bring into here. Creating terms is fairly straightforward. I can use this new term button, click on that, and I use a term template. There's a system default, or you can create your own. If you have other fields you may want to capture as part of this. And I can call this a test glossary item. Give a name, give a definition. And if it's hierarchical, I can also put in a parent if I need to as well. I can add acronyms, so TST might be short for test in this case. If we have any URLs, links, I can add a resource here also. I may have some related terms that I can hook in, so use synonyms or related terms, and this is really other items that might be part of your business glossary. So let's pick big data, just for a maybe related term might be administrative data. And go to contacts, and like our data sources and data assets, we can define these here as well. In which case, in my limited demo environment, I only have 2 users or 3 users. Let's make demo user and demo 1 as the experts. I can add information about them as well if it's relevant. Hit create. Now, important item is your glossary item is in a draft state at the moment. It can't be used for tagging. As part of the workflows, which are in preview at the moment of recording, you can apply workflows to those, so you can then draft and have then a owner of the glossary then make sure they're published. At this case, I can just edit this and go approved. I can say it says expired or an alert on that. Look forward to what comes down the roadmap from Microsoft in this regard. Hit save. And there we have it. We've got a glossary term. Go back to my terms, and I go down, scroll down, or I use my little shortcut at the top here for T. I've got my test glossary item down here. A couple of examples I want to call out. I've got these regions of Australia here. In fact, if I go into this first one, ACT, I can see I have a parent item, which is up the top right hand here, that it's in this region of Australia. Another example is in aggregate data. I might have related items, so synonyms and related terms, in case they're the same, that I can then click through to. You're also able to upload bulk terms through import terms. Using that same term template, there's a CSV file you can download and use that to then push terms up here in bulk as well. So you can start building your glossary terms up in here, and makes a really complete, useful set of resources for your organisation, and then start applying them across your data assets. So I want to show you now what it looks like to use Microsoft Purview as a non-privileged user. I've entered the URL web.purview.azure.com, and I'm going to press enter on that. And it's going to take me straight to the governance portal. Now I need to know who I am. So put my login details in. and the password. Keep signed in. I'm going to be prompted for authentication as well with the through MFA. Okay. Now I have access to Microsoft Purview directory and the account as well. I continue. I can also use the URL to land directly in there without getting that prompt for choosing the directory or account. Now, in terms of the end user experience, it is very similar. A few slight changes on the home page. We don't have the data sources showing up here next to our assets and glossary terms. And I can't edit the glossary, I can't view the glossary. I can go in here, I can't create new terms, but I can see everything, which is very helpful. I have access to all the menu items on the left. A lot of that I can't access to do much with. But really, let's look at the search experience and what I'm going to do. Now, I'm going to type ahead and type INV for invoice. And it's going to suggest a range of terms for me. So that auto suggestion, really helpful. Also, some assets that it's going to suggest as well. I'm going to pick a different term, more generic, the word date, which comes across a lot of our data assets, and see what we have in here. Interestingly, the first item, if you're following along through the session, we put into an S3 bucket earlier, and that's now appearing. We also can see our customer tables. We've got blob storage. We've got even got Power BI. And we've also got a glossary item coming up here in our search items too. I'm able to use on the left these filters to then narrow down my choice. I can choose a collection, or it could have, say, I'm looking for information around postcodes and really hone in on that information. Also got the experts and some glossary items here too. So there's level big data I could potentially use, and then go into that and look at it. Before I do that, I just want to call out another item that I haven't talked about yet, which is the certified. You may have seen it when we were editing metadata before, but as a data steward, I'm able to certify a set of data, which is a signal to the end user that I can know and trust that. So when I look at all the data I've got here, those with a certified badge certainly stand out. Let's go have a look. The experience is very much the same as we were with a privileged user looking at this. I can browse information, I can view it. There's Lineage in this case that we can see, and no contacts, but I can see all the information here. And so as a business user, I might go, great, this is what I'm after, it's going to fit the bill, but I have access to this storage location. So how do I do that? So let's look at then how we in fact do workflows. So workflows are a new feature within Microsoft Purview. We're in preview state at the moment at the time of recording, and this should be available for production usage very soon, general availability very soon. One of the workflow features is the ability to request access to data, which when I first reviewed Purview was something that I sort of thought would be a really good feature to have, so I'm glad that Microsoft have brought this out. From here, as a non-privileged user, I can put a request in. It'll pop a little window on the side. I can make a change to that. In this case, I'm happy with I'd like request please, and press send. What that does, it does a couple of things. It sends off an email, or triggers a workflow foremost. As part of that workflow, it triggers an email for the whoever configured. In this case, it could be the data owner. We've just used one of our privileged accounts for that in the workflow. That email then comes through, and we're able to get notified there's a request here. And that email looks something like this. We have a request, I can see who it's requested by, they're trying to access, and I can approve or reject. But rather than clicking on that, let's have a look at what the experience is. I'll navigate through this as my data steward or process owner. So I'm back in now as my Purview master account. Again, the role doesn't be this. Anyone you appoint as being the approver can do it. But I can look at some of the tasks I might have. And down here, my management window, I have this workflow area. Now, in terms of the workflows themselves, let's look at the authoring experience. I've got the same workflow apply across all three collections. We're in the transactional data collection. See where it's applied, and it looks very familiar if you've used sort of workflow tools before. We have a request that comes in. It starts and waits for an approval in here, and that assigns that to an email that we saw before. Now, I haven't enabled this for this session, but there's a new feature again in Preview called Data Use Management, or DUM. And if I approve that as an initial request, if then we have a policy applied in place that allows us to automatically then assign those rights to the person requesting access to that data asset, then it will do that. And it's pretty limited at the moment in terms of what data sources you can do that for. But again, a new feature from Microsoft that hopefully will evolve over time, optimizing the provisioning experience. In which case, which we'll see, it'll create a task for us to then complete the action manually. So we can track and manage those tasks through the environment. So let's look at what might have come through in my requests and approvals. And I have this data access request here for this COVID data. So if I click on that, I can see it's come from my demo user, like access. I can approve or reject that. In this case, I'm going to approve. I can add any comments to it if I like. I'm just going to press confirm. So that's sent that away. And what it does is creates then the new task. I'm just going to refresh this. And we have a new then data access request. So this is the request and provision access, which might be different to the person who approves access. If I go into this part of the workflow, it has information around what access is required. I can change the status to in progress or completed. I don't have any control those options. I'm not sure that will change in the future or not. In progress, if I may have to do other work to do that, or wait for someone else, or so the process you might need to manage, it sends a signal then to the requester that it's in progress. In this case, say I've made the access, I've completed, hit confirm, and then the requester gets an email to say that has been done. And that's just an example of the workflow capability you have now for access requests for data assets, helping Purview be that enabler to then break down silos of data, because your business users can now search and find information rather than duplicating data and struggling to find real information in your environment. So a really powerful feature. So one of the last features I want to show you in this session, and there's certainly others here we haven't covered off around sensitivity labeling or details on how you enable classifications and probably a few other things I've certainly missed, is again another preview feature called Data Estate Insights, which can be found on the menu here on the left. So the Data Estate Insights provides information for the data stewards, the data curators, to understand what state information is, whether it's been classified or not, how Purview has been adopted and used. There's a range of telemetry you get out of the environment here. One of the items I really liked, and it's very hard to gauge this with a limited sort of demo environment, the usefulness of this. You can see here by these charts, we've got owners assigned, not assigned, or it's not curated, and how Purview classifies that. One of the ones I really liked though, to help with the value proposition, is this Catalogue adoption view here. So we can see, based on the number of users, or average number per day, what that looks like in terms of are they searching, are they browsing, and there's more curation activities. I can see the most viewed assets, and then some of the search terms, top search terms that we have, or while there's nothing in here, search items no results. So this provides a signal to the data stewards that what are people searching on? Are we missing a term that should exist in there, or is there data we should have in here that isn't being ingested yet? And helps then think about how else do we change and improve our data catalog. So there's information about data stewardship in here. There's information around assets, number of assets, types of assets. You have filters on here as well, and this makes sense as you start scaling this up. What type of file types do you have in here as well? Also information in Glossary, including a term tag here of the most in use, most applied Glossary terms. The status of your terms as well. So we've got terms with assets, 6 assets, we've got a number of terms that don't have assets assigned as well. So it helps you keep up to date. Well, and curate those terms, make sure they're relevant. Also the completeness of those terms, so not be missing multiple items. I can then click through that, drill down, and then see, right, no experts assigned, definitions aren't here, or look further and see what more information might be needed. We haven't really touched on classifications, but you can see information about the classifications here, types of classifications, what the top classifications are. So this one here, second one here, the Latvia personal code is a system generated one, automatically applied, and you can see how that might be used in your environment. And then we haven't touched on sensitivity labels. If you had any sort of sensitivity labeling as part of the M365 E5 type of application, that would show up here as well. So this is a really, again, it's a preview item. The reporting has existed through Purview, but it's been a really sort of overhauled, I guess, and rethought through the label data estate insights as part of this new release that will be generally available soon. So that's a bit of a wrap for, I guess, a walkthrough of Purview as it stands right now in the middle of 2022. But one of the questions I wanted to, last topics to raise really that I do get queried a little bit around is, well, this is really great, this is really useful, but what does this cost to run? Unfortunately, it's one of these services that's a bit hard to calculate from the outset. So I'll show you, I guess, my demo environment, some of the Azure Purview pricing page, and that will help you think about what this would look like. So I've headed over to the Microsoft Purview pricing page. This is a really good read in terms of understanding some of the various components that you need to, that may be considered when you need to price out Microsoft Purview. There's a range of options here. I'm not going to read through all this. Certainly either just sort of search for it, or I'll try and provide a link if possible. But one of the core elements is the Microsoft Purview data map. So this is where we connect to data sources and is the central point of ingesting the raw data. The type of activities that incur billing includes populating, so metadata and lineage extraction of different data sources, enriching that, and generating insights, and then the consumption of that, serving up information back to your business users. So the scenario is really going to, depending on your scenario, how Microsoft Purview is charged and used will sort of depend on the usage and how then you promote and use that in your organisation. So this is more from a compliance and management. We don't have a lot of end users using this. Then it'll be very different to then scaling this out to hundreds or thousands of users who will then be actively using that. And really the best advice at the moment, while Microsoft Purview still only went generally available less than 12 months ago, is to just sort of pilot this and baseline assess. There's some good examples here you can use to do that. You can see, even though they're items that are free for a limited time, and items that then have a charge per the processing time to, say, do that scanning. that's a really key element as part of Microsoft Purview in terms of that usage charge. There are items that are included, the business glossaries, for example, and Lineage with that data map. And there are some items that are also free while Purview is in preview, or elements are in preview. I have noticed since prior to September, when Purview went into general available, there are still items that have said free in preview, although Purview was not in preview at the time. So that's just really the data catalog, the key components. There's data state insights, so insight consumption, when you want to sort of call information, and there's other features in preview as well that will have some charge at some stage. So it is a bit hard to gauge. The next thing I want to show you then is some of these data catalog, some of the usage meters that you can see when you start using this. So I'm on my Purview service page inside of the Azure portal, and I can see down the bottom here, I've got these two metrics. My data map capacity units, which is a measure of how much of the data map has been used at any given time. So when I'm actually scanning and ingesting data, I've only had this turned on for only about 2 weeks now. And then also the metadata storage, in which case with my limited amount of demonstration data, it's actually quite small compared to the data set itself. I probably have several gigabytes of data that I've ingested, but the metadata itself is actually quite small. So I wouldn't say it's a massive concern. I'm probably moving the needle that much, but I can't really tell when looking at it here. So I've switched over now to the cost management within my demo tenancy here, and I filtered on the resource group that I've used for this demonstration for the month of June, which is the time period where I've had this active for about 12 days. So I've consumed about $310 for that. Of that though, looking at the bottom left here via resource, the Purview service of $261.09 has been the key contributor. The other items in here are some of the databases that I've provisioned to assist with the demo. So this gives you a view of what that looks like. But if you haven't deployed Purview yet, there's another resource group that you need to keep an eye on. I'm going to switch over to this managed resource group for my Purview account. And select that. So this gets provisioned when you deploy Purview. Has some extra functionality to help with the connectivity and management of those data assets, and it has a cost as well. So we can see here, that's $11.33 for the same time period. So what does this really mean? To maybe exemplify this in terms of what this might look like for you, again, this is based on demonstration data, but say I was to run this then for 12 months. I've just divided the actual Purview service plus that managed resource group, divided by 12 days, and I have a run cost of $22.70 a day. Now, that might seem like a lot for a development environment, and I guess one of the features I certainly like to see coming up in the roadmap would be you turn off Microsoft Purview if it's in a development or test instance, because you don't need to have that running all the time. For a production usage though, even for a small set of users to help manage your data, and then the usage of then people accessing that and consuming that, starting from $8,000 a year, is I don't have a wide view on what data catalogs cost in the market, but certainly my understanding is that is at a great price point to get started and grow that, and then help with that managed adoption. I imagine you start unlocking the value from being able to find assets across your organisation, and you'll have a very positive ROI very quickly. That gives you an indicator of, I guess, what Purview may look like over a sort of a 12-month period, and use that as a baseline compared to other systems as well. As I said, it's certainly a lot of value from that, particularly for larger organisations where you'll get the ROI very, very quickly. So that wraps up a bit of a summary of Purview as it stands at the end of June in 2022. A lot of capability in Microsoft Purview, a lot of new features that come out in Preview as well. Hope that was useful, and all the best wishes with your own Microsoft Purview journey.